There might be something wrong with me. I have this beautiful R90 that I haven't even gotten running yet, but for some reason I had to acquire another air-cooled bike from Craigslist. This one has half as many strokes and about a 20th the displacement, but it does have 2 more pedals. This is a Peugeot 103 Moped. If you're wondering what exactly makes it a moped, or if you don't know too much about them, this is what makes it a moped. You can start it with the pedals. You can kick start it or pedal start it, or you can pedal it just like a bicycle, which is a good thing when you buy a Peugeot because you'll break down pretty often. This one is actually already scary fast. It's not nearly as sketchy as the red one that I used to have. I'll post a link to that bike. That bike had like flat bars, and it just had a ported stock engine that I built for it, which was actually a gigantic pain. These are actually really difficult to rebuild, it turns out, but they are so much fun. And the only reason that I sold my last one is because a guy offered me like a ridiculous amount of money for it, so I had to do it. But this one popped up, and it was such a phenomenal deal because it's already fairly kitted out. It does need some work, which I'll get into in a minute. It has a 70cc kit on it already, and it has a interesting mismatch of parts. So this is a Parmakit head, which I think is like an 84cc head, and then it's a Polini jug stock exhaust. This is a Malossi Variator, which is really expensive, and I was really surprised that that got thrown into the deal. It has a Dellorto 1515 SHA, or SHA, 15 SHA as they're often called, which means it has a different intake and a less restrictive reed valve. One thing that these mopeds had when they came to the States is these tiny little reed valves that barely let in any air to keep these things nice and slow to make them legal. Obviously, I don't need to follow any of those rules because that's stupid. It has a CDI conversion, which is just about the best thing that you can possibly do to one of these Peugeots to make them reliable. If you're completely unfamiliar to mopeds, this portion of the frame right here is actually the fuel tank. Isn't that cool? Just like on a beach cruiser, but this is actually where the gas goes. There's the filler cap. He even added a little trail tech right there, which is kind of handy. Helps you make sure that you don't have a meltdown. This is a headlight from a Moped, which is another type of moped. There's Motobicanes, there's Pooks, there's Peugeots obviously, Tavis, Tomos. There's a whole bunch of different companies, but just for whatever reason, I fell in love with these bikes. I love the way that they just sit there and they just shake like they're about to rattle to pieces. And it's a pain in the butt because, you know, you'll be riding these along and then parts will be falling off as you go down the road. But that's all part of the experience. Pretty much any moped that you're gonna buy these days is gonna have battle scars. But honestly, this one is not too bad. It's straight. The last one that I had, I think, had a slightly bent frame. So looking at the rear fender here, you'll notice that there's a couple different chains going on here. There's the chain for the pedals when you're pedaling it, and there's also the chain that goes to the pulley for when you're utilizing the engine. And then one thing that's really unique about these, and the reason that they're so fast, is they have this thing called a Variator bolted to this side of the crankshaft. And what this does is, it looks like a little yo-yo, and it's real small right now so that you have power when you first take off. But then as you rev the engine up, it's crazy what happens. The engine actually rotates down. You'll see that there's a tiny little spring in there. These two sides of this front pulley Variator piece pinch together and change the ratio between the front of the belt and the pulley. Right here we have some cute little side covers. There's a kill switch inside this one. You can access it just by twisting that on and off. Here's the little plate on the other side with the Peugeot Lion. Super important. You'll notice that this thing actually does have suspension. It's got like tiny little baby motorcycle parts. It's so adorable. I love these things. They're great. And then just above the rear fender here, we have this piece, which is usually a luggage rack, but someone put a banana seat on it, which is actually great because having 2 people on one of these is just the greatest experience ever. So as far as plans for the build, I'm gonna need to tune this thing. There's some cracks in the exhaust that I'm gonna need to fix. One thing this bike really needs is a decompression valve. That's what this lever right here used to do. This would be pulled like that, and it would release the compression inside of the cylinder, and then you'd be able to kick start it or pedal start it really easily. So the Parmakit head is gonna have to go, unfortunately. I'll probably hang on to it though, because these are getting fairly rare. I don't know if you can even find them. Honestly, 103s are starting to get pretty rare. I think that the people that still have them finally figured out how to fix them. So to fire this thing up, I'm literally just gonna take my drill and put it on the flywheel over here, and then just get the thing turned over until it's up to speed, and then it'll fire right up. It's important to be kind of careful when you do this to not have it on the hammer function, because then you might just strip out your crankshaft and then you have to rebuild it, which is kind of a nightmare. These are actually kind of tricky to rebuild, like I was saying. Let me give you an idea just how rough and bumpy these things are. I'll set the camera on it. Super cool how mechanical these things are. Let's take it for a rip.